today's announcement was such a shock because for the first time in decades, a presidential administration is looking to put oil rigs off every coast in America.
You lost 11 shipmates.
Yes, sir, I did. Some of which I was very close to.
Less than a decade after the massive BP oil spill, the Trump administration is preparing to open up new offshore drilling and pull back many of the inspection regulations put into place after that disaster.
The announcement today made by Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke will now open roughly 100 million acres of offshore waters to oil exploration. The move was hailed by the energy industry, and it also comes on the heels of another push to roll back some of the safety regulations put in place after the Deepwater Horizon spill 7 years ago.
Someone, somewhere, was screaming, "We need to disconnect from the well. We need to disconnect from the well." The subsea supervisor for the night shift was at the panel, and he refused to disconnect from the well without authorization from the OIM and the BP company man. The OIM had, at that moment, just made it to the bridge, and he was coughing and vomiting. He was in pretty bad shape. The BP company man was up there already. And they started shaking Mr. Jimmy. Mr. Jimmy, we've got to disconnect. And he finally was able to get the words out, yes, disconnect, in between the choking and all of that.
Mr. Jimmy is who?
Mr. Jimmy was the OIM.
So he gives the order to disconnect from the well.
So now we've got half of the order that we need. But people are screaming, "Chris, disconnect, disconnect." And he said, "I will not disconnect without the authorization of the BP company man." He's only had half the authorization. The BP company man proceeds to the panel, and I'm actually sitting 5 feet from the panel. They open the panel. He's got his fingers on the buttons, and the company man is studying the panel for what seems like minutes. And then finally he gives the decision, yes, disconnect. They press the button. The inferno doesn't go away. It's actually still growing. It's now engulfed the entire derrick. You cannot see any part of the derrick any longer. It's completely in flames. Which tells us that the ESD did not work. The BOP that was supposed to protect us and keep us from the blowout obviously had failed, and now the emergency disconnect to get us away from this fuel source has failed.
The Trump administration would also roll back a rule governing blowout prevention systems. A faulty blowout preventer contributed to the BP oil spill more than a decade ago. The companies would no longer, under this new rule, have to monitor those systems in real time. Instead, they'd only have to keep the equipment necessary to do the monitoring. Also, that equipment would only need to be tested one time. Right now, it has to be tested twice a week. As you might suspect, the entire Florida delegation, both Republicans and Democrats, seem opposed to this plan.
Every Floridian remembers what happened to us.
From the floor, Senator Bill Nelson blasted the proposed changes, saying Floridians remember the closed beaches, tar balls, and the death to marine life, and just how long it took for the Gulf to recover.
Exactly what he's putting at risk with this proposal.
The Trump administration said today that it would allow energy companies to drill for oil in nearly all the waters surrounding the continental United States.
Well, it's not just tech that could see change under President-elect Trump. The energy industry is preparing for an overhaul, one they're happily anticipating. With names like Rex Tillerson, Rick Perry now, and Scott Pruitt as potential cabinet members, the oil industry has never had so many allies in Washington.
ExxonMobil chairman and CEO will be his Secretary of State. Mr. Trump announced this morning that he will nominate Rex Tillerson as the country's next top diplomat.
Tillerson has spent his entire career, more than 4 decades, at ExxonMobil, so he has vast experience doing business with foreign governments, including Russia, and that has already been met with some criticism from those inside and outside his party. At age 64, Rex Tillerson has headed the world's largest publicly traded oil company for nearly a decade. Last year, he was ranked number 25 on Forbes' list of the most powerful people. Under Tillerson's leadership, ExxonMobil struck a deal with Russia in 2011 to begin drilling for oil in the Arctic.
One thing is for certain, when Congress comes back, they've got to understand that we need more domestic energy, not less. And one place to find it is offshore America.
Chant is drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill, and drill now. Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill.
Now to a major political battle that is brewing over oil. There are billions of barrels of crude off the U.S. coast, but drilling for new wells has been banned for a quarter century. Today, President Bush said America needs that oil and called on Congress to take action so the oil companies can get it.
Today I've issued a memorandum to lift the executive prohibition on oil exploration in the OCS.
This is a full-blown assault on America's coastlines and beaches from sea to shining sea. We're going to look at suing the Department of Interior. We're going to put every challenge we can in front of this plan.
122 miles off the Louisiana coast in deeper water and able to pump more oil than Deepwater Horizon ever did, sits BP's monster of an oil rig. They call it Atlantis. It runs on technology some say rivals the space shuttle, but when you ask for the engineering documents, the blueprints, the schematics, the drawings that show you how to put this thing together, you'll get a surprise. 90%, that's right, 90% of the safety documentation for Atlantis was missing as of the end of 2008. That's according to the advocacy group Food and Water Watch, which got the information from a BP project supervisor turned whistleblower. The group says Atlantis is an accident waiting to happen, and they're in court seeking an injunction claiming Atlantis needs to be shut down now because in an emergency, no one would know how to.
He's everything. He's the breath in my lungs. He's the beat of my heart. He's the skip in my step, and the dances that we shared together. It's all gone.
Shelly Anderson's husband Jason was among the 11 workers killed when the Deepwater Horizon oil drilling rig exploded on April 20th, about 66 kilometers off the U.S. coast. On Wednesday, senators discussed industry accountability and compensation for the families of those who died. Committee Chairman, Senator John Rockefeller.
It is my understanding today that Transocean, the owner of the Deepwater Horizon, is seeking to limit its liability for this loss in federal court under a legal loophole that is both unconscionable and outdated.
Existing U.S. laws limit the damages paid for wrongful deaths at sea, as opposed to on land. Lawmakers are considering changes to these maritime laws. Natalie Rosto's husband Shane also died in the explosion. She says drilling rig companies would pay greater attention to worker safety if there were greater financial stakes.
Because they knew the law. They knew that they could just throw these men out there and just, give them a little safety every now and then. And if something happened, they didn't think that we would be sitting here today doing this.
Both women are now raising young children alone. Transocean says it will honor all of its legal obligations arising from the incident. But the company has also petitioned for all lawsuits to be heard in one court before a single judge and paid from a single fund. Senator Frank Lautenberg also raised the issue of the oil spill's environmental fallout.
This is it, as ugly as it is, and you see what happens when this carelessness took over.
So far, an estimated 560 million liters of oil have spilled into the Gulf of Mexico.
With new technology, with tiny footprints even on land, it is safe to drill, and we need to do more of that.
As for offshore drilling, it's safe enough these days.
We can explore in environmentally friendly ways. New technologies enables for
to be able to drill like we've never been able to do so before.
The oil rig Deepwater Horizon exploded. It sank 2 days later, with 11 workers missing and presumed dead.
I felt really disgusted at that point that all of these things that are supposed to protect us are failing and nothing's going right. And it was almost a disgusting feeling that nothing's going the way it's supposed to go.
Martha Nelson called the plan to open drilling in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, quote, an assault on Florida's economy, saying the proposal defies all common sense.
Birds are dying in large numbers. Several islands in the Gulf serve as wildlife refuges for some 3,400 birds. And veterinarian Joe Smith with the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo says conditions could get a lot worse. Bottlenose dolphins are also among the casualties. His aquarium is treating 10 of them, and he says he is also concerned about a large colony of manatees off Florida's Gulf Coast. This turtle is among the victims of the Gulf oil spill. It is one of more than 300 turtles that the Oceana Conservation Organization says has been found dead or injured since the spill began April 20th.
Well, life is hard out there for sea turtles ordinarily. It's getting harder by the day.
5 species of sea turtles nest and spend part of their lives in the Gulf of Mexico, and 3 of them are either threatened or endangered. John Hewitt of the Audubon Aquarium of the Americas in New Orleans says his group has been able to clean and recover only 16 turtles. Sea corals rest in silence. Some are 4,000 years old. Nobody knows yet what will happen to them in the worst environmental disaster in the U.S.
The chant is drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill, and drill now.
Finish this sentence. If you don't produce more oil.
Look, I'm going to look them in the eye and say, fellas, you've had your fun. Your fun is over.